Michael had dedicated his life to wildlife conservation, spending countless years in the heart of Africa's wildest jungles, saving animals, studying their behaviors, and ensuring the survival of species that teetered on the brink of extinction. He was a man of the wilderness, calm, patient, and deeply attuned to the rhythms of the natural world. His job wasn't just a profession, it was a calling. He had witnessed the raw beauty of nature and the crushing reality of its fragility. And he had become one of its fiercest protectors. It was on a quiet morning in the savannah, as Michael was making his way through the dense underbrush of a remote reserve, that he felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. An old, instinctive warning. He had spent enough time in the wild to recognize the signs. Something, or someone, was observing him. It was not a new sensation. But this time, it felt different, more familiar. Michael paused, his every sense attuned to the surrounding forest. The sounds of the morning were muted, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. His eyes scanned the trees ahead, searching for any sign of movement. It wasn't long before he saw it, there, just beyond the trees, a pair of amber eyes watching him intently. They were unmistakable. It was Zara, the leopard he had saved years ago. She stood with her head tilted slightly, as though considering whether to approach him or retreat into the safety of the jungle. Her golden coat blended seamlessly with the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. Her sleek body poised and graceful, a perfect representation of the power and beauty of the wild. Michael's heart skipped a beat. The sight of her, standing there in the wild, was nothing short of miraculous. He had never expected to see her again. When he had rescued her all those years ago, she had been just a small, fragile cub, badly injured, on the verge of death. She had been no bigger than a cat, her body broken and her spirit nearly shattered. Michael had nursed her back to health, using every bit of his knowledge and resources to heal her wounds. And as time passed, he had watched her grow into the formidable predator she had become. He had let her go once she was strong enough, knowing that the wild was where she truly belonged. But now, seeing her again, so much time later, Michael felt a deep surge of emotion. The bond they shared was something special, something that transcended the boundaries between human and animal. "Zara," he whispered, his voice low, filled with awe and affection. The leopard's ears flicked toward the sound of his voice, her eyes narrowing as she sized him up. She had changed in the years since they last met. She was larger now, her muscles taut and powerful beneath her sleek fur. Her markings were more pronounced, and her gaze had hardened somewhat, a reflection of the fierce survival instincts that had been honed by years in the wild. But despite the changes, there was something in her eyes that remained the same, a spark of recognition, a flicker of the trust they had shared. For a moment, neither of them moved. Michael stood still, respecting the distance between them, understanding that this was her domain, and he was merely a visitor in it. He had never taken for granted the trust she had given him when she was just a cub, and he would not take it for granted now. Zara's gaze softened, and she took a tentative step forward. her movements fluid and confident. Michael's heart swelled in his chest. She was not just any wild animal, she was his friend, his companion, and the bond they shared was one of mutual respect and understanding. He had seen many wild animals in his life, but none had touched him the way Zara had. As the leopard approached him, Michael knelt down slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and calm, as not to startle her. The years of his work had taught him the importance of patience, and he knew better than anyone how quickly the wild could turn dangerous if approached recklessly. But with Zara, it was different. He had earned her trust once, and he was hopeful that the bond they shared would still hold after all these years. When Zara was just a few feet away, she stopped and sat down on her haunches. Still watching him intently, Michael extended his hand slowly, palm up, the way he had done so many times when she was a cub. Zara's amber eyes flickered between his hand and his face. Her muscles tense as if weighing the decision. She was cautious, as any wild animal would be, but there was no immediate sense of hostility. Michael's breath caught in his throat as Zara took one step forward, then another, until she was close enough for him to touch her. With the gentlest of movements, Michael reached out, his fingers brushing against her fur. It was warm, smooth, and just as he remembered. Zara's body shivered slightly at the contact, but she did not pull away. Her eyes closed for a brief moment, and Michael could swear that he saw a flicker of recognition in him, an acknowledgement of the years they had spent apart, and the deep bond that still tied him together. In that moment, Michael felt as if time itself had folded in on itself. The years, the miles, the separation, all of it seemed to melt away. Zara rubbed her head gently against his outstretched hand, a behavior Michael knew well. It was a sign of affection, one that was rarely given to humans. It was a moment of connection that transcended species, and it brought tears to Michael's eyes. He had known that the wild was full of untold stories, but he never expected to be part of one this profound. As they stood together in the jungle, Zara's presence reminded Michael of everything he had fought for in his career as a conservationist. She was a living testament to the work he did, the hours spent in the field, the sacrifices made, the heartache of losing some animals and the joy of saving others. She was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, there was always hope. But their reunion wasn't just a personal moment for Michael. It was a reaffirmation of the wild's power and beauty. Zara had survived because she had the strength and will to do so, and Michael had played only a small part in her story. The wild had shaped her, just as it had shaped him. They were both creatures of the earth, bound by the same fundamental laws of nature, but it was the shared experiences that had woven their lives together. Zara's head turned slightly as if she were beckoning Michael to follow her. Without hesitation, Michael stood up and began walking beside her, his steps careful but confident. Zara moved gracefully through the forest, her movements a seamless blend of power and agility. Michael marveled at her, noting how much she had grown and changed, but how much she had stayed the same. She was still the same creature that had trusted him all those years ago. And that trust was something that would never fade. They moved through the jungle together. As equals. Partners in a shared journey. Michael didn't need to speak. Zara knew the way. She led him to a clearing, where the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. Here, the world felt alive, bursting with the sounds of birds, insects, and the rustle of leaves. For Michael, it was a reminder of why he had devoted his life to this cause, the preservation of these precious creatures, the fragile ecosystems they inhabited, and the deep connection between man and nature. As the day wore on, Michael and Zara sat in the clearing together, watching the sun sink lower on the horizon. The bond between them was unspoken but undeniable. They had shared a history. And though their lives had taken different paths, they were once again connected in a way that was both simple and profound. Michael knew that his time with Zara was fleeting, that the wild could be unforgiving and unpredictable, but for that moment, nothing else mattered. They were together, and that was enough. As the sky turned a deep shade of orange and the first stars began to appear, Zara stood up, her powerful body shifting as she prepared to leave. She looked at Michael one last time, and with a soft, almost imperceptible flick of her tail, she disappeared into the shadows of the jungle. Michael sat there for a long time, the cool evening breeze rustling the leaves around him. He knew he had just witnessed something rare, something that few people would ever experience. The bond between him and Zara was more than just the saving of a life. It was a connection that transcended time, one that would stay with him forever. As he rose to his feet and began to make his way back, Michael felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had given his life to the protection of animals, and he had been rewarded in a way he never could have imagined. His heart was full, and he knew that his work was far from over. But in that moment, he understood that it was not just the animals he saved that made a difference, it was the connections, the friendships, and the moments of grace that truly defined his journey. The days had passed in a blur of activity, as Michael continued his work in wildlife conservation, traveling to remote corners of the African wilderness and working tirelessly to protect the species he held so dear. But there was one companion who had remained a constant presence in his life: Zara. The leopard, once a fragile cub he had saved from the brink of death, had become an integral part of his journey. She had grown into an impressive, independent predator, a symbol of resilience and strength. But she had never forgotten the man who had given her a second chance at life. Zara's appearances in Michael's fieldwork were frequent. She would sometimes appear out of the dense brush, her golden coat gleaming under the sun, her powerful muscles rippling as she moved with the grace only a leopard could possess. Often, she would join him during his conservation efforts, either observing silently from a distance or, occasionally, working alongside him in ways only a creature like her could understand. There was a silent partnership between them, a shared bond forged in the fire of past struggles and survival. But Zara wasn't just a creature of the wild anymore. She had become a reminder for Michael of the fragile yet fierce balance that existed in the wilderness. They had both learned from each other. Zara had learned the ways of the wild, becoming a formidable predator. And Michael had learned patience and humility, knowing that his role as a protector was not to dominate nature but to coexist with it. They shared a mutual understanding, a quiet, unspoken connection that transcended species. Michael could read her body language better than anyone else, and Zara seemed to recognize him in a way that no other animal did. It wasn't just survival that tied them together, it was something deeper. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, Michael found himself on another trek through the savannah. Zara was by his side, as always, her keen eyes scanning the landscape, alert to every rustle in the grass, every distant movement. Michael felt the peace that came with her presence. There was something calming about knowing that she was nearby, a living reminder of the incredible journey they had shared. But on this day, something was different. Zara seemed uneasy, her usual confident stride had slowed, and Michael noticed her glancing over her shoulder, her ears flicking in response to sounds that Michael could not hear. She was on edge, and for the first time in many years, Michael felt a pang of concern. Something was not right. Later that evening, as the two of them ventured further into the wild, the situation took a sharp turn. Zara, who had always been so agile and strong, suddenly faltered as she tried to leap across a narrow ravine. She miscalculated the jump, and in an instant, her body collided with the rocks on the opposite side. Michael's heart stopped as he saw her crumple to the ground, a pained growl escaping her lips. He rushed to her side, his mind racing. Zara, the powerful leopard, was hurt badly. Her right hind leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and she was struggling to rise. Her breath came in shallow, labored gasps, and there was a look of panic in her amber eyes. Michael had seen injuries in the wild before, but this was different. This was Zara, the creature he had once saved. And now she was in pain. Michael knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he gently assessed the damage. It was clear that her leg was broken, possibly shattered, and there was no way she could heal on her own. The wild could be unforgiving, and Zara's survival instincts would be of little use if she couldn't move. He had to act quickly, or she wouldn't survive the night. Without a second thought, Michael pulled his emergency medical kit from his bag, his mind already working through the steps needed to help her. He had treated many animals in his time, but this was different. This wasn't just a job, it was personal. Zara had been a part of his life for so long, and he wasn't going to let her suffer. Not now, not after everything they had been through together. As he carefully worked to stabilize her leg, memories of their time together flashed through his mind. He remembered the day he had first found her, lying in the brush, a broken and abandoned cub. She had been no bigger than his forearm, and her tiny body had been riddled with wounds. He had gently cradled her in his arms, trying to calm her as he transported her to safety. He had watched her grow stronger each day, her once dull eyes now filled with the fierce, independent spirit of a predator. And then, there had been the moment when she had first shown her gratitude, when, after a particularly harrowing experience, she had bitten his hand in a playful, yet affectionate gesture. It was a simple act. But to Michael, it had meant everything. It had been her way of saying thank you. Now, as he held Zara close, his hands working with practiced care to bind her leg, he was reminded of that moment. He had never imagined that he would be the one to save her again, but here he was, trying desperately to keep her alive, just as he had all those years ago. The connection between them was undeniable. It wasn't just the act of saving her life once more, it was the trust that had developed between them over the years. It was the friendship that had blossomed between a human and a wild animal. Born from survival, nurtured by shared experiences, and deepened by the silent bond they shared. Zara whimpered softly as Michael secured the bandages around her leg. And Michael's heart tightened. The pain she must have been in was unbearable. But she didn't flinch or struggle. She lay still in his arms, trusting him in a way that most wild animals would never trust a human. Michael whispered softly to her, reassuring her as he worked. "You're going to be okay, Zara. I won't leave you." Hours passed, and Michael worked tirelessly through the night, doing everything he could to stabilize Zara and make her comfortable. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting a soft glow over the scene as he gently stroked her fur, his hand shaking slightly from exhaustion and the emotional toll of the situation. Zara's breathing had steadied, though she was still in obvious pain. Michael could feel the bond between them strengthening in that moment. He wasn't just saving her. He was reaffirming the promise he had made all those years ago, that he would always protect her. As the night wore on, Zara slowly began to relax in his arms. Her body, though battered and broken, seemed to understand that Michael was there, that he was doing everything in his power to help her. And Michael, he felt a deep, unspoken sense of responsibility and love for this creature. She wasn't just another animal in the wild, she was a part of his life. A constant reminder of the wild's beauty and its fragility. By the time dawn began to break, Zara's condition had improved slightly. She was still weak, but the worst of the danger had passed. Michael, exhausted but relieved, finally allowed himself to close his eyes for a moment, holding her gently as she rested against him. They were both tired, physically and emotionally, but there was a deep, shared comfort in the silence between them. When Michael finally rose to his feet, Zara remained where she was, resting on the ground, her amber eyes watching him with a trust that spoke volumes. Michael knew that the road to recovery would be long for her. But for now, they had made it through the worst of it. And that, in itself, was a victory. "I'll stay with you," Michael whispered, his voice steady despite the overwhelming emotions swirling within him. "We'll get through this together. Just like we always have." And for the first time in a long while, Michael allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they would both survive this journey, and every one that would come after it. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the savanna. The air was thick with the stillness of dusk, as if the world itself had paused, waiting for the inevitable. Michael knelt beside Zara, the leopard he had saved so many years ago, his heart racing in his chest. Her powerful body, once full of grace and agility, was now lying motionless on the ground. Her breathing shallow and erratic. The golden light of the setting sun illuminated her sleek fur, now marred by the blood stains of her injuries. Her left hind leg was a mangled mess, twisted in a way that no animal could recover from without help. Michael had seen injuries before, but nothing like this. Zara, the fierce and independent predator he had raised and watched grow into the wild, was now vulnerable, lying helplessly before him. He could feel his pulse in his throat, the overwhelming sense of dread suffocating him. Michael's hands trembled as he gently placed them on Zara's chest. Her fur was warm beneath his fingers, but the rise and fall of her chest was slow, labored. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. Every second that passed without intervention was a second closer to losing her. She was more than just an animal to him. She was his friend, his companion, a living testament to the wild and his life's work. He couldn't lose her, not now, not like this. The scene around them was eerily quiet. The wind rustled softly through the tall grasses, but everything else seemed to be holding its breath. The chirps of crickets, the distant calls of birds, all faded into the background, drowned out by the thunderous beat of his own heart. It felt as though time itself had slowed, as though the world had gone silent in recognition of the delicate, fleeting moment between life and death. "Zara," Michael whispered, his voice barely more than a choked murmur. His hands were already working, moving with practiced speed, checking her vitals, trying to stabilize her body. He needed to get her to safety. He needed to move quickly. But the odds were against them. The wilderness was unforgiving, and he had only limited supplies on him. But he wouldn't, let her slip away, not without a fight. He could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier with every breath Zara took. Her once strong, powerful body had been reduced to a fragile shell, the blood pooling beneath her, staining the earth. The bones in her leg were shattered, and the wound was deep, too deep for any hope of a quick recovery. Michael's mind raced as he pressed his hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding, applying pressure in a desperate attempt to keep her alive. The sun was setting quickly now, the golden light casting an orange glow across the landscape, highlighting the sweat on Michael's brow. Each drop felt like a weight pressing against him, the urgency of the moment amplifying the physical toll on his body. He wiped his face with his forearm, his breath coming in sharp gasps, trying to stay calm, to think clearly, but it was becoming harder and harder. His heart was pounding, and every instinct he had told him that he was running out of time. His fingers worked with precision, moving quickly but carefully. He reached into his pack and pulled out the medical supplies he had with him. A few bandages, a tourniquet, anything that could help stabilize her long enough for him to transport her back to the reserve. But even as he worked, the weight of his fear grew heavier. Could he save her? Was there enough time? Zara's breathing was getting weaker, her body trembling with the effort to stay conscious. Her amber eyes, once so full of intelligence and strength, were now clouded with pain and confusion. Michael could see the panic in them, the realization that she couldn't get up, couldn't run. He had seen that same look in the eyes of so many animals before, when they realized they were vulnerable. When they realized the wild was no longer a sanctuary for them. But Zara was not just any animal. She was his. And Michael had never been one to back down from a challenge. Especially not when it came to something he cared about. He pressed his hand firmly against her chest again, his fingers feeling the rise and fall of her breath beneath his palm. His eyes locked with hers. And for a moment, time seemed to stop. Everything else disappeared, the wind, the grasses, the distant mountains. There was only him and Zara, locked in a shared moment of vulnerability and trust. "Stay with me," Michael whispered hoarsely, his voice cracked with the weight of his emotions. But he couldn't let his fear show. He needed her to hear him, to understand that he wasn't giving up on her. Not now, not ever. Zara's eyes fluttered, a small, barely noticeable movement that sent a surge of hope through Michael's chest. She was still there. She was still fighting. He worked faster now, his movements more urgent, more frantic. He applied the tourniquet to her leg, trying to slow the bleeding. His hands moved with precision. But the situation was slipping from his control. Zara's body was heavy in his arms, and her breath was becoming more erratic. Each second that passed felt like an eternity, stretching out in front of him like an insurmountable obstacle. He took a deep breath and steadied himself. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything. Michael's mind flashed back to the first time he had met Zara. She had been nothing more than a small, injured cub, her body broken and fragile. He had held her in his arms, desperate to save her, unsure if he could, but he had. And now, years later, he was here again, holding her once more, doing everything in his power to keep her alive. It was as if the roles had reversed. She had once relied on him for survival. And now, he was relying on her will to live to help her pull through. His hand trembled as he checked her pulse once more. It was faint, but it was there. Her heartbeat was slow, but steady. Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. But it was fleeting. The battle was far from over. He had saved her once. But this time, it would be different. This time, he needed more than just hope. He needed to act. The wind whispered through the tall grass, its gentle rustling a reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of the wild. But in this moment, they were everything. Zara was everything to him. He had dedicated his life to saving animals, to protecting the wild, but it had never felt as personal as it did right now. Zara wasn't just an animal to be saved. She was a part of his life, a living, breathing testament to the connection between man and nature. His breath was coming faster now, panic starting to creep into his chest. Time was slipping away. He couldn't afford to waste another second. He gently lifted Zara, cradling her fragile form in his arms, trying to keep her still as he moved her toward the makeshift shelter he had set up earlier. Every step felt like a battle, each movement a test of his endurance and willpower. "Just hold on, Zara. We're almost there," Michael murmured, his voice trembling with exhaustion. The shadows of the night began to fall, the stars slowly emerging above them. But Michael didn't notice. His focus was entirely on Zara, on her survival. It was a fight against time, against nature, and against the elements. But Michael was no stranger to battles. He had fought for the wild before, and he would fight for her now. And as they finally reached shelter, Michael collapsed beside Zara, his chest heaving with exhaustion. He placed his hand gently on her head, his heart pounding in his chest, unsure of what the future held. The night was quiet, save for Zara's shallow breaths and the distant call of the wild. But Michael knew one thing for certain: he would never stop fighting for her. For the wild, for life. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, he held onto that truth with everything he had. The horizon stretched before Michael, bathed in the fading glow of a sunset that seemed to weep alongside him. The sky, once bright with the fire of day, was now a soft blanket of purples and oranges, slowly surrendering to the cool embrace of night. The winds whispered across the savanna, the tall grasses swaying gently as if nature itself was holding its breath in the wake of the loss. In the midst of it all, Michael stood, motionless, beside Zara. She lay on the ground, her body still and peaceful, her golden fur once so vibrant now dull and lifeless. The wounds from her battle were no longer visible, as time had claimed what was once full of life. The once powerful, graceful predator, the companion he had saved and nurtured, was gone. Michael had spent hours holding her, trying to save her, but the battle had ended. He had done everything he could. His hands, which had once comforted her when she was a fragile cub, now trembled as they stroked her cold, lifeless form. His heart felt as if it had been cleaved in two, the emptiness spreading like a cold wind that swept through every part of him. He had been with her in every moment of her life since she was a cub. And he had been with her in her last moments, fighting against time to save her once again. But sometimes, even the fiercest of animals, the ones who survive against the odds, cannot fight death. It had come for Zara, and there was no way to hold it off. Michael's hand lingered on Zara's side, feeling the faint echo of her heartbeat, a memory, a ghost of the strength she once had. Her breathing was no longer labored, no longer erratic. There was only the stillness, the finality of it all. The tears came then, silent and slow at first, and then with a quiet force that broke through the dam he had tried so hard to hold in place. The sorrow was overwhelming, like an ocean pulling him under, drowning him in its depth. As the sun's light slowly faded, Michael's breath hitched, and his chest tightened with the weight of grief. His fingers gently stroked the soft fur on Zara's head, just as he had done when she was a cub, when she had first trusted him. It felt like a lifetime ago. And yet, it felt like just yesterday. He could still remember the first time he had cradled her in his arms. Her small body trembling, eyes wide with fear and confusion. He had promised her then that he would protect her. And now, with her lifeless body in his arms, he felt the crushing weight of that promise. "I couldn't save you this time, Zara." The thought echoed in his mind like a cruel whisper, and Michael fought against the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. He had failed her, no matter how hard he tried. No matter how far he pushed his body, his mind, his spirit, he had failed. The wind picked up, rustling the tall grasses around them, and Michael could almost hear the whispers of the wild around him, as if the earth itself were mourning with him. The cries of distant animals, the flutter of birds taking to the sky, it all seemed to belong to a world that was slipping away from him. The universe was moving on, indifferent to his pain, but in that moment, he didn't care. He didn't care about anything except the loss of the one creature that had meant so much to him. Zara had been more than just an animal to him. She had been his friend, his companion. She had been a reminder of everything he had dedicated his life to: preserving the wilderness, protecting the animals, and ensuring that the beauty of the wild would survive. But it wasn't just about the work. She had been a part of his life, his journey. From the moment he had found her in the forest, abandoned and broken, she had become his responsibility, his bond, his spirit. They had shared so much: the quiet nights under the stars, the days spent tracking animals together, the moments of peace in the midst of the chaos of the wild. He had watched her grow into a fierce, independent creature, one who could take on the world with nothing but her strength, her agility, and her instincts. She had survived the wild on her own, and Michael had watched with pride as she learned to hunt, to survive, to thrive. She had become a part of the landscape, as much a symbol of the wild as the trees, the rivers, the sky. But now, all that was gone. The soft light of the sunset was fading rapidly, the coolness of the evening creeping in. Michael could feel the coldness of the air against his skin, but it was nothing compared to the coldness in his chest, the hollow ache that seemed to stretch infinitely. He closed his eyes, letting the tears fall freely now, as if the release of his sorrow might somehow bring peace to both of them. "I'm sorry, Zara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't protect you this time." His hands continued to caress her fur, smoothing the ruffled patches as he spoke to her, though he knew she could no longer hear him. "You were so strong. You fought so hard. You've always been strong. I should have been stronger, too. I should have." But the words caught in his throat, unable to find their way out. The weight of the grief, of the guilt, crushed him with such force that he could hardly breathe. Zara, the lion-hearted leopard, was gone, and Michael had to accept that. But it didn't make it any easier. The sky above them had turned from orange to a deep purple, the stars beginning to emerge, twinkling softly in the vast expanse. Michael stayed there for what felt like hours, his fingers gently brushing Zara's body, offering comfort that she no longer needed, his heart breaking with every breath he took. The sound of the wind grew louder now, the rustle of the grass mingling with the distant calls of nocturnal creatures preparing for the night. It was as if the earth was moving on without them, the world continuing to turn despite the loss. But Michael couldn't move. He couldn't leave. Finally, as the last light of the day disappeared beyond the horizon, Michael stood up, his legs shaky beneath him. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to collect himself, trying to find some semblance of strength in the face of such overwhelming loss. His hands trembled, and his heart felt heavy as he stood over Zara's still form, his body aching with exhaustion and grief. "I will carry your spirit with me, Zara, always," he whispered softly, the words coming out barely above a breath. "I will never forget you." He bent down one last time and kissed the top of her head, pressing his forehead gently against her. The wild had taken her back, but it had also given her to him, just as it had given him so many other incredible moments in his life. Zara had been a gift, and Michael would treasure the memories of their time together for as long as he lived. With a final, lingering look, he stood upright, his heart heavy with the weight of goodbye. He turned and walked away, each step carrying him farther from Zara. But in his heart, she would remain. The wind swept across the savannah, the stars above them blinking softly in the growing night. And for the briefest moment, Michael could feel her with him still, her spirit lingering in the air, in the very land that had shaped both their lives. And as he left the savannah behind, Michael carried with him the memory of a wild, beautiful soul, a leopard who had once trusted him, and whose trust he would honor forever. The days that followed Zara's passing were heavy with silence and sorrow. The savannah, once filled with the sounds of her graceful movements, the rustle of leaves as she darted between the trees, was now eerily quiet. Michael had seen countless sunsets, but none like the one he saw after Zara's death. The colors of the sky seemed more vibrant, almost as if the earth itself was mourning the loss of such a powerful creature. Yet, even in the midst of his grief, Michael knew something vital, something undeniable. The legacy of Zara would live on, not just in his heart, but in the work he continued to do. In the forest that had been her home, Zara had been more than just an animal. She had been a part of his soul, a symbol of the raw power of nature and the unbreakable bond that could form between man and beast. When she had first entered his life, a fragile cub, alone and broken, he had never imagined that she would become the force of nature that she had. He had watched her grow into a beautiful, independent predator, and, in turn, she had taught him more about survival, resilience, and love than any person ever could. But even in her death, Zara had left behind a legacy far greater than Michael could have ever anticipated. Her spirit was woven into the fabric of the wilderness they had shared, and Michael was determined that it would never be forgotten. Determined to honor her memory, Michael made the decision to create a sanctuary, a place where animals like Zara, animals who had survived against the odds, would have a home, a place of safety, a place where the wild could thrive without fear, just as it had once flourished in Zara's presence. He would build it in the heart of the forest, the same forest where they had spent so many hours together, watching the sun set over the horizon, sharing moments of quiet companionship. And so, over the course of several months, Michael worked tirelessly, with the help of a few trusted colleagues and volunteers. He cleared land, built enclosures, and created a haven for wildlife. The sanctuary was small but vital, a refuge for creatures in need, whether they were sick, injured, or simply in need of protection. Each corner of it seemed to carry a piece of Zara's spirit. a place where her memory could live on forever. It wasn't just a place of safety for the animals, it was a living tribute to the bond he had shared with her. Zara had been the first. The one who had taught him the true meaning of dedication and sacrifice. And now, in her honor, Michael would ensure that the lessons she had imparted would continue to shape his work. The opening of the sanctuary felt bittersweet. A moment of triumph overshadowed by the absence of the one creature he had dedicated his life to protecting. Yet, in the opening ceremony, as he stood before the gates of the sanctuary with a few of the local villagers and supporters, Michael knew that this was the beginning of something much bigger than his grief. It was a continuation of the journey he had started with Zara. A journey that would carry on in her name. The work of conservation was never easy, but Zara's memory kept him going, reminding him of the purpose he had chosen. And in those quiet, solitary moments when he stood alone in the sanctuary, watching the animals roam freely, Michael could almost feel her presence beside him. It was as if, in the very air of the place, her spirit still lived on, watching over the creatures she had once shared the earth with, ensuring that their future was just a little bit safer. One evening, as the sun began to set on another day in the sanctuary, Michael stood at the edge of the forest, looking out over the land. The light was soft, a fading orange glow that cast long shadows over the earth. It was the same time of day when he had first met Zara. When he had watched her, small and fragile, lying in the grass. The memory of that moment came rushing back to him. And for a moment, he allowed himself to remember everything. The pain of her early injuries. The joy of watching her grow stronger. The unspoken bond that had formed between them. As the sun sank lower in the sky, Michael made his way to the edge of the sanctuary, where a small, quiet clearing lay at the heart of the forest. This was where Zara had been laid to rest. He had built a small stone monument there, marking the place where her body now lay, her spirit forever intertwined with the earth she had roamed so freely. The stones were engraved with simple words, in memory of Zara, the heart of the wild. He knelt beside the grave, his heart heavy with grief, but also full of love. He had spent countless hours here, often alone, speaking to her as though she was still with him. He would tell her about the sanctuary, about the work he was doing, about the animals they had saved together. It wasn't that he believed she was still physically present, it was more that her spirit had become a part of him, woven into his every action. He knew she would always be with him, guiding him through the challenges of the wild, just as she had done when she was alive. Michael sat there for a long time, his back to the setting sun, his thoughts turning inward as he reflected on their time together. He thought of the quiet moments they had shared, the days spent in the wild, the connection they had forged. He could still feel the weight of her body in his arms when he had carried her to safety all those years ago. And he could still hear her soft growl when she had shown her gratitude after recovering. Every moment had been a precious gift, one that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As the sky darkened and the stars began to twinkle overhead, Michael stood up slowly, his hand brushing over the stone monument. He looked up at the stars. his heart swelling with both sorrow and gratitude. He had given so much of himself to this work, to the wild, to Zara, and he had received so much in return. She had shown him the raw beauty of the wilderness, the power of resilience, and the importance of protecting what mattered most. In that moment, he raised his arms to the sky, as if reaching for the stars themselves. "Goodbye, Zara," he whispered, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you for everything. Your spirit will always be with me. Always." As the wind swept gently through the trees, Michael closed his eyes, letting the moment wash over him. The pain of loss would never truly fade. Zara's absence would always be felt. But the love, the bond they had shared, would never die. It would live on in the sanctuary, in the work that continued, in every animal saved, and in every moment that honored the spirit of the wild they had both fought to protect. The stars above shone brighter now, their light casting a gentle glow over the land. And Michael knew, in the deepest part of his heart, that Zara would never truly be gone. Her legacy would continue to guide him, to inspire him, and to remind him of the incredible bond that existed between man and beast. As the night deepened and the world around him grew still, Michael stood there for a long time, one hand pressed against the monument, the other reaching out to the sky. And in that moment, he knew that Zara's spirit was alive, not just in the sanctuary, but in every corner of the wild, in every animal he fought for, and in every step he took forward. Her memory was eternal, and the love they shared would never fade. In the heart of the wilderness, where the sun rose and set in endless cycles, Michael had found something more enduring than time. He had found a love that transcended life and death, and it would continue to burn brightly in the hearts of all who believed in the beauty of the wild.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.